Hi, everyone. I think we are going to get started. We want to try and make sure that we get everyone out of here by 8 o'clock. So welcome. If you are here to find out more about who might be running your student government in a few weeks, then cool, that's awesome. You're in the right place. If you're here because you're in my class and you need extra credit, then awesome. Just make sure you do a write-up and let us know what you thought of what it is that you see tonight, and I'll open a submission box for you by Friday when you are submitting your next homework assignment. And if you're here because you're my wife, thank you. So I just want to give a little introduction as to who we are. We are the University of Arizona Discourse Series. Our purpose is try to elevate public conversations as much as we possibly can. And what we found out this year, we were doing our overarching theme is the state of higher education. And we thought that student government was a pretty important part of higher education. And what we have found out as we've talked more and more to students who are not part of student government is that they don't really know what student government is or what it actually does. If you want to listen to our most recent podcast on this, they asked the question, what is student government? Although I think that they use slightly different language to ask that question. And our hosts are right there, Maddie and Bella. But we are called No Need to Argue if you want to check out that. And we have the Discourse Debrief every Friday if you want to listen to our social media there. That said, I want to just introduce you to our next upcoming event is going to be at the end of March. We're going to be talking about the corporatization of the university. We're going to have a faculty panel with students there to ask questions. We'll be trying to figure out where all that money went, and we will try to make sure that we have a clear idea as to what it is that's going on with how our education is moving, and whether or not that has to do with corporatization. And finally, again, if you want to follow us on any of our socials, you'll be able to see all of our future upcoming events, including the Regents Cup, which is the state tournament that we have every single year. This year it's hosted at NAU. Hopefully we will beat ASU, because boo to ASU. That said, I want to go ahead and get started again. We want to make sure that we are done by 8 o'clock this evening. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to have each candidate come up individually and have a brief discussion with me, talk a little bit about who they are, introduce themselves to you. We'll find out why it is that they are running for the position that they're running for, what they plan on doing with that position. And if anybody has a question, we probably have time for like one audience question per person. So have one ready. And that said, I'm going to call up the candidates one by one in alphabetical order according to their first names, because that's how we have them listed. So let's go ahead and get a round of applause for all of our candidates before we even start. Thank you very much to our candidates. Come on up. Our first candidate running for UA Student Body President is Adriana Grijalva. So Adriana, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So hi, my name is Adriana Grijalva. I'm a junior here at the University of Arizona studying political science with a minor in Spanish. I currently serve as the ASUA Student Body President this year. I was born and raised in Tucson. I'm a first-generation Latina student and with a learning disability, which I like to say because I think a lot of people didn't think I was going to make it to college. And so being here and getting the opportunities I have had has been amazing. And like I said, I've played music all my life for the most part, and I really enjoy being here at the U of A.
Thank you. And what is it about student government that got you interested? Were you in student government earlier on when you were in high school and things, or what was it about student government that made you want to run for this position?
Yeah. So I was not involved in student government in my high school or freshman year. I got involved my sophomore year, and a lot of that was after the shooting of Professor Meixner. I got involved in gun violence work and did a lot of work with Students in Man Action, Gabby Giffords. And so with that, I really saw the advocacy work and was personally affected. I was scared to go to class. And even from the past, in my senior year of high school, I suffered a lot with anxiety and depression from being harassed by my principal, and I almost took my life for it, and that really was life-changing for me. And so with that, I knew a lot of students were struggling, and I really wanted to be a voice for students. So my sophomore year, I served as the chief of staff for the student body president, and with that, I got to see a lot of the struggles. And also, I think with going to the fact that students don't know about student government, I definitely think there's a lot of work we need to continue doing. And I will say we have made it a long way. We've built about 40 partnerships this year alone and have really advocated for mental health resources, food insecurity, safety, and those were some of the things that as a sophomore I really wanted to continue advocating. So my junior year, after winning that sophomore election, I really wanted to do that for students. And I think that's an important factor into student government is that we're a voice for students. And this isn't about my resume or what leadership skills I get out of it. It's about the students. And I really have advocated on that and amplifying the student voices. Our job is supposed to be about 25 hours. I put about 100 to 130 hours a week. And with that, it's because of the care. Students really need somebody that has been through the struggles. I wasn't gifted a lot when I was younger. I had to really work hard for everything I've had. So I think that really was what brought me to student government was the advocacy work and the community that is built through that. We are the top 18 student government in the country. So I think that really goes to say for our programs and services that we serve for students, for our international student population, for our low-income students, first gen, that really plays a part into the student government that we serve here at ASUA. And myself being involved sophomore year, that really helped me my junior year in advocating because I knew what ASUA looked like, what could be improved, and that's why I'm running for re-election because I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
Great. Obviously, you have a deep background in this, so you're probably the right person to ask this question of. My older sister was involved in student government, both as an undergraduate and a graduate student. And in preparation for this, I was talking to her about the key question that I kind of had, which is, how much power do people who are in student government have? Because I mean, I'm a faculty member and I often feel pretty powerless sort of in the face of administration. So I'm interested to know when you're talking about being a voice for students, how does that sort of play into actual action and how much traction can students who are part of student government actually get?
Yeah, I think a lot of people see president and think, oh, they could do everything. There is a little bit of a pause in that, and I think sometimes there is the realistic part of that and what we could actually do sometimes. And I think there's a lot of not I in it, but we. I think, from the town hall that we did with the fourth floor, I would have not been able to do the work I did if it wasn't for the students involved, the admin that I was able to work with. And I think that's something, too, that goes with student government, and especially this role, is that you have to be in the middle. You have to be able to work with the students and admin to actually make change. And I think that's something I've definitely have gone hated for. In a sense, I think a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes of the work, though, and think like it's really easy. But when crisis happens, there's a lot of behind the scenes that nobody sees and those conversations. And so I think the power that we have is, as president, you sit on committees. And so we have our presidential committees, which are distributed through the president, the presidential cabinet, and through Senate, which is overseen by our executive vice president. And so through that, there's some power in that, in having student voices amplify in committees. And then there's also the part as president, you're overseeing the entire structure of ASUA, our student government. So with that, the leadership that's spread out through that, but also the programming and the things that we do there. But I think a big part is that the power you have is what you see in the students and the student voice. And I think something we're still missing and working on is including students in those big conversations, but we've made a lot of improvement on that through town halls, through student focus groups, and inviting students to the table. And I think that's a big thing that we have power to this year. And I think without building those relationships and that trust, that would not be there. Like after the shooting happened, if those partnerships that we built with safety were not there, UA alerts or the things that we worked on afterwards, we would have not had direct communication with our VP and chief of UAPD. So I think those are some things to look at when having a say on things.
Great. Let's introduce some student voices into that conversation. Again, we'll have probably time for about one student question per candidate. And again, there are debates later on in the campaign season. Hopefully questions will be more sort of like getting to know the candidates a little more. This is not the space to challenge the candidates, but who has a question for our candidate here to bring your voice into the conversation? Great.
What do you think is like the most difficult part about staying in touch with the student body well enough to know what you should be lobbying for when you're in those town halls or other meetings that you were talking about?
Just to repeat it so that the cameras can hear, the question is, what's the most difficult part about staying in touch with the student body as a candidate? Great.
Yeah, I think, for students and especially in these moments of crisis, there's definitely sometimes a little bit of chaos that is seen through that. And I think something that's hard in being in touch, and like I said, I think we still have a lot of work to do to include students in that voice is how do we do that? I think that's been a big thing because there's so much things going on through campus, a lot of resources, but how are we getting that to students? So we've talked about the student experience. We definitely think there could be improvements there and getting resources out. And I think that's been a huge thing into that.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. I think that we are going to move on to our next candidate, but thank you so much, Adriana. All right. And second in line, also running for UA student body president, we have, I think I'm pronouncing this right, Andy Pongratz. Hi, Andy. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And I'll just go ahead and start with kind of the same question, which is, what is your interest in running for student government, and how did you get involved in just being interested in the concept of student government in the first place?
Well, excellent question. Well, hi, everyone. My name's Andy Pongratz. I'm also a junior here at the University of Arizona studying philosophy, politics, economics, and law, PPL. Beyond my coursework, I'm also a researcher with the School of Sociology, writing policy for Pima County in the city of Tucson to reduce poverty throughout the region of Southern Arizona. Beyond that, I'm also the lead organizer for Hack Arizona, which we are bringing back to campus after a 5-year hiatus, just right after spring break. What inspired me to be running for student government, this will actually be my third time running, surprisingly enough, which is always exciting. I really enjoy meeting people across campus, having those difficult conversations, whether it's around campus safety, whether it's around engagement and resources, and how we're taking care of our students and how they feel as part of this community. Really, my start in student government was in high school. In my sophomore year of high school, wrote the first ever student council constitution in the type of the high school that I was attending. And that was a really interesting experience, just working with faculty, working with administrators, and kind of introducing this idea of shared governance at the high school level, which is very prevalent at the collegiate level, as we know. I think just to clarify that too, shared governance is this idea where in an institution, we're not competing over power, we're really competing over what roles and responsibilities everyone has within the institution. Faculty are responsible for curriculum, students are responsible for taking classes and being actively engaged in the community. Administrators run the campus, they do all the other stuff on the side. So I think that's really pushed me to continue having leadership positions across campus, whether it be Hack Arizona, whether it be my work with the Honors College and Eller College of Management, to really always make sure that we're grounding student voices in decision-making processes, but also really explaining how decisions are made too. Because, sometimes decisions can be made at the faculty level, at the administrative level. Sometimes they're made above that too, at the administrative level too.
So this being your sort of third rodeo and going and talking to a lot of students during that campaigning process, what is it that you most often hear the biggest concern that you hear from students? And obviously, I would imagine part of that is that you hear different concerns from different groups. But is there a sort of common thread? Do you feel as though there's an overarching concern that a lot of students have? Or are we seeing that there's a sort of splintering of different groups across campus?
I think it's a really excellent question. I think I would have to say, after I spend 10 minutes explaining that we have a student government to a lot of the student groups I go speak with, that's always kind of the first hurdle is like, yes, we have a student government. Yes, they do things. Yes, they have influence. Yes, they have power, whatever we want to define that as. But beyond that, I think a lot of those issues really come down to how are students able to navigate through the university. When I started as a freshman, I'm living in the dorm, I'm taking hard classes, I need to have relationships with my professors and my classmates. A lot of that comes down to just navigating bureaucracy, navigating uncertainty. And I think another big part of that too is costs right now in higher education have skyrocketed in the last few decades, and our students really feel that here at the University of Arizona as well, where half of our student population are Pell Grant eligible students. They're on scholarship. So that's another commonality too. But I would say that we hear different things depending on the student group that we're talking to.
And if you want to hear more about the skyrocketing costs of education, come to our event about the corporatization of the university on March 25th. Quick plug. But my last question for you, and then we'll again sort of just take a question from the audience for anybody who has one, is so connect this to students' real lives. If you had to sort of articulate to students who are here how it is that student government actually impacts their day-to-day lived lives on campus and things that they would actually see and feel, can you articulate at least an example of something like that?
Yeah, I think it's a really excellent question. I think, as was said previously, too, a lot of the work is happening in the background. It's not always kind of up front and center. I think a big part of that, though, is like a lot of the allocation money that comes into student government that's coming out of students' tuition dollars, that's coming out of our student engagement fee, that goes to the bookstore, and then the bookstore in turn provides 25% allocation to student government, and that goes into club appropriations. And we won't get into the weeds of all that right now. But I would say for students, I mean, that's probably the most tangible thing, is the money that you're paying in your tuition dollars is going to the student government, which is going to fund these programs. It's going to fund Safe Ride, Campus Pantry, all these different things. And I don't think a lot of students realize that, like, Campus Pantry, Campus Closet, they're run by the student government, and that's your money that you're paying for those services.
I mean, I think that is probably one of the things that I find most impressive about all of you who are running for administrative and executive roles, is that student government can often be a thankless task because we don't necessarily sort of see, we don't necessarily know who's doing it, and we don't even realize that all of the work that you guys are doing. So I'm really glad that we have this forum to announce that. Okay, let's get a question from the audience. Who has a question for our participant, Andy? Abby.
What would you say is something that you're striving for the most to achieve as students?
Great. Again, the question for the camera is, what are you looking to strive most to achieve as student body president?
Ooh, where to start? I think there's a lot of different avenues. I think obviously creating more robust funding sources for the programs that we offer our students is always pretty paramount. I would like to see our student government actively engage with alumni that were in student government in the past. Those alums are now in high places, whether they work for the Arizona congressional delegation or they're working up in Phoenix at the state legislature. I think those kinds of connections, and especially with potential donors too in that regard, is saying, hey, Campus Pantry, like every year we're just barely making it by. We have the campus benefits dinner and we're raising all this money, but it's just like every year we're just kind of clinging. I want to make sure that we create those really stable funding sources by connecting with alumni, by connecting with potential donors. That way we can have those programs supported, and that way it's not every year where it's like, we're 2 weeks into the semester, club funding has already run out because we don't have any more of it to give. I think there's a lot of avenues that we can be more innovative within student government here at the University of Arizona, and I really want to take ideas from other student governments across the country to really, expand and be more effective in our practices.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. All right, I think we're going to move on to our next candidates, but thank you so much for... Okay, moving on down the list, we are going to now move to our executive vice presidents and our administrative vice presidents. And starting out with our UA executive vice presidential candidate, we have Benjamin Huffman. And Benjamin, as the first candidate who is going to be speaking to this role, my opening question for you is, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then if you could tell us what the UA executive vice president even is and what that role is, and you could explain it to us, that would be great.
Yeah. First off, thank you everyone for attending. Really appreciate that. That means a lot.
It means a lot for not just me as a candidate who's interested in running these positions, but it means a lot to have student support wherever we look. And oftentimes I think that it gets undersold. But my name is Benjamin Huffman. I'm running to be our next ASUA Executive Vice President. The Executive Vice President position is the one responsible for overseeing our ASUA Senate, working with our clubs to try and go through the club allocation process so that way they can get funding to provide all the necessary programs and services that they provide, but also it's supposed to be like the intermediary between our Senate and then administration and the rest of our executive team. So again, everyone has their own little slice of the pie that they contribute to, but I think over the last year I've gotten experience serving not only as the College of Education's ASUA senator, so being as one of the many senators in our legislative body, but also serving as Senate president, getting to work with my fellow peers and my fellow senators to get a chance to hear what's going on in their college, what makes them want to pursue those degrees, pursue those professions, and how is the university supporting them and getting there. You know, we're all coming here to do 100 different things, and what we get our degrees in might not always be what we end up doing for the rest of our lives. But we want to make sure with the time that we have at this university that we're spending that in a productive sense and we feel supported. And I believe our student government has an obligation and the ability to ease some of those burdens. I think there's a lot of things that as students that we're aware of, whether it's, tuition changing or whether it's a certain fees that we feel like spring up out of nowhere. One of the big ideas that I'm trying to work on with not just currently in student government, but it's a big platform in my campaign, is trying to eliminate, we have, basically for graduation, you have a cap and gown that you have to purchase in order to participate in the festivities and ceremonies. Some people get them graciously donated by donors who find it out of the kindness of their heart to help students in this final moment that should be, an absolute achievement and just rewarding them for that success. But that comes at a cost, and I think we're seeing costs come from all different kinds of directions. And I'm implementing a cap and gown rental program that right now we're trying out in the College of Education. We're all going to cross our fingers and make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, but we're working on a program to make sure that students can save money where possible, and especially a program that's a rental program that actually uses previous purchased goods, then donates them to the next crop of students. It saves students money in the long run, cuts down on waste, and is a form of students giving back to students. Wildcats helping fellow Wildcats. And I think it's a good model representation of what our student government can do. It's helping students help other students. And I don't pursue the position of executive vice president just simply to oversee our Senate. It's an important duty, but we need to be sure that we're electing responsible leaders who care about not just why they're getting involved in these positions and races, but making sure that we're having honest conversations with all members and all peoples that come to this university. Because I'm from Tucson, but I'm just one of the many thousands of voices here on this campus. So we are a destination for people not just in this country, but around the world, that they see this place as somewhere where they can start, whatever their future holds.
So would you say that one of the central facets of the role of the executive vice president is largely sort of financial? Is it largely sort of helping to secure funding and helping to make sure that we're sort of easing financial burdens on behalf of students, or are there other aspects outside of the financial aspects?
Yeah, to clarify, I'd say most centrally, yes, because they're inherently tied to the Senate funds as well as the budgetary funds that we have for the allocation process for our clubs. There obviously are those financial roots. In regards to a rental program for caps and gowns, that's just something to me personally that I'm passionate about, that's not necessarily interwoven with the position, but in that position, the conversations that I have with whether it's administration within my college or just administration at large, those conversations go a lot smoother when you're talking to people who weren't just elected to represent one slice of the student body, but the student body as a whole. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, on the point of the student body as a whole, my last question that I had for you is, we're an enormous campus. We have a lot of students. So in terms of the student body as a whole, how do we find out what it is that all of those students across the entire university need? And how do we make sure that we're not sort of, giving, paying too much attention to one group and ignoring another? How do we sort of keep all of those balls in the air?
Yeah, I'll I'll throw you, this is theoretically how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to pay attention to your elected representatives, say your senators, and they're supposed to hold office hours that you should be able to frequently attend, bring forth any questions, or reiterate any of your concerns to your respective dean of your college. And somewhere along those meetings where your senator meets with your dean, whatever you brought up, whether it's to the senator or to the dean, gets shared with one another. Again, that's all in concept and in theory, and if everything goes well, but we're all students, we're all very busy, our time is very limited. I don't know how many of you have reached out to your dean and said, here's the problem that I have with this university, I don't like this class, I don't like this practice. It's a little impractical, but at the same time, we have an opportunity for this campaign process to, if you see people out on the mall asking for just a few seconds, I know we're all very busy, but I'd implore you to talk with us. We're first and foremost, we are your peers and we are your equals. We're not running for these positions for some sort of, prestige. It's as you mentioned, we're not necessarily the most well-known people on campus by any stretch of the imagination, but we care about this university and we care about this campus. So to make sure that all the voices are heard, I think it's important not only that we stop and have conversations, but we also document and try and do as much of what we are doing right here, be as transparent and try and divulge as much information as we can. Things change rapidly, so that's certainly a hindrance to that process, and what is true one week might change the next week. But I think we need to make sure that our elected representatives, whether it's on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis, maybe just sit down and have a conversation like this, saying, this is what I worked on this week. I had a meeting with so-and-so, and you don't have to go into all the nitty-gritty specifics, but if it's like, I'm working on this specific program to help you in this way, that's something that I just separately as a student would want to know. I think when you're voting, you want to decide not just who you're voting for, but why am I voting for this person, and why is their priorities in line with mine? And if it's not, well, then that raises a lot of alarm bells in my head.
Yeah, and to be clear, the people on the mall you should talk to are the people from student government, not those crazy religious people who are like trying to shout at you and tell you that you're going to hell. You definitely should not be talking to them. Okay, great. And let's just get a question for you from our audience. Who's got a question? Yeah, great.
I like the importance of connecting with the people on the team. Face to face is huge for me. Do you have any plans to have events where we can come to you with inquiries or your team with inquiries, something that is better than the email, I guess I would say?
Great. Sorry, let me just repeat the question for the cameras. The question is, are there any plans to have more public events where people can come and speak to the team directly?
Yeah. Some of you might have seen in the lead up to our primary elections, we had some tabling events. I know that doesn't work for everyone, and we're trying to explore all the different ways. We have social medias. If you haven't followed either our ASUA, whether it's elections, ASUA Today, or ASUA Senate, we do try and have some sort of outreach efforts to where if you don't catch us in that specific time, you can see some of what we're working on. But I would say there are plenty of different ideas, whether it's a town hall, whether it's kind of like a Meet Your Senators event, things like that. That there's a lot of things in the works that we have the potential to do, but it only comes through if we elect people who are passionate about their positions and care enough to like set aside 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, to hear from students, because nothing works without student input and student support. And I think that's the biggest takeaway of, who you vote for is just as important as whether or not you're voting. And for a lot of our students, they're choosing not to vote, and that should matter a lot to us too.
Well said. Thank you very much. Thank you, Benjamin. Is Demonitza here? Okay. Then we are moving straight down to our first UA administrative vice president rather than executive vice president, and that candidate is going to be Joshua. Is it Yayola? Right? Is that right? Did I get it right? Okay. Sorry, I asked you before and then I forgot. Josh, thank you very much for being here. Again, if you could not only introduce yourself, but because we're now talking about administrative vice president rather than executive vice president, if you could talk a little bit about what that role is, in addition to what your interest is in it, and a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Okay, well, hi everyone. It's nice to see you all this late evening. My name is Joshua Ayomiku Jayola. I'm Nigerian. I was born in Nigeria. When I was 5, I moved to the UK, and when I was 10, I moved to the US. So I've been an international student for most of my life, until actually a year ago. I got my green card. But so I've lived many lives, I like to tell myself. I'm big on human rights. I'm big on perspective. There's so many things that I had as my parents are really traditional African. If you know anything about that, they're very strict with certain things. But being able to look towards people's backgrounds and basically not just limit yourself to what you know, see perspectives is what's utmostly important to me. And then side note, I love running. I do track. So just letting you know a little bit about my personality out there. The administrative vice president role is one that I feel like is very unique on the board because it directly works with the services and programs. So there's a keyword that I like that is on the page. It says oversees. It's not managed. It's not in charge of these programs, but basically kind of works as the mediator. That's the good word to use between all these programs. And the programs and services, in my head, I divide them up into three things. There is health and well-being, and under that, I would put SHAC. SHAC is changing from being under ASUA, but SHAC, Force, Pride Alliance, I would say health and well-being because of the things and the characteristics they have. And then the Basic Needs Center, I say just basic needs, things that people need to be productive, to be active in our community as Wildcats. And then the last bit, the fun part, the entertainment, the Zona Zoo, web, things that keep us connected as a community. And I think the administrative vice president role is important because I see it as like a minister of culture and wellness, being able to articulate the different perspectives and connect them to the services and programs that go along with that.
So is it largely, again, because we have such a sort of large student population and sometimes you can feel a little bit lost in the sea of all of the different things to be able to do, is it largely sort of like helping those students feel acclimated in that space, feel a little bit sort of more like they are part of that community? Is that sort of a big part of this role?
Oh, most definitely. And I think that's what it was really implemented for. And we were talking earlier before this started how a lot of schools don't have two vice presidents in that sense, or if they do, they have more of a board, like exec type of structure. And I think that more importantly, from my personal background and perspective, the first time that I knew anything moving to a different country at such a young age, I needed help with a lot of things. We spoke English in Nigeria, obviously, but everything seemed so disconnected. And obviously, I've been in the US for a decade now, but things still seem a little off sometimes. And we do focus on the Arizona community and how most people are in state, but there are a lot of international students, there are a lot of people that find it harder to navigate. So the navigation part, the connective piece, the getting to know where you can get certain services is very important to me because I was food insecure for so long, for a very good part of my life, and it was very embarrassing. But I realized that not everyone has the same story, the same timeline, but being able to be a bridge to help someone be successful in life is what's important. The university is supposed to foster education, foster knowledge. And if someone is having these issues that they can't have help or assistance with, how can they be fully successful? How can they reach their max potential? So that's where it comes from.
Yeah, I mean, Bella and Maddie, what was it, Campus Pantry that you guys were talking about on the podcast? That we were we were kind of surprised even existed, and that's a service that is really helpful that the student government can provide for people who are food insecure and sort of like raise awareness of those things. So I guess that's my final question before we move to the audience, which is all of these really great programs and services and all that kind of stuff that we're providing. Zona Zoo, I think we all know, right? But so how do we just make students more aware that this stuff is available to them, let alone sort of just like actually do such a great job providing those services?
Yeah, last week I had the privilege of going to one of the directors' meetings with all the programs and services, and this is where it's very tricky, and it's going to take a lot of creativity. Because an example, like Campus Pantry, they had the issue of when they advertised that a lot of people thought it was just, oh, I can go grab a snack there, I can go do that. So it's very weird to balance that, to let people know, okay, this is for a supplementary thing for people to get that help. And I think really going out more, which they have been doing, they've been doing a great job. If you guys saw their Instagram, they just raised a lot of money with their banquet, and I was so impressed. It was so nice. It was so good. So really being able to support that. And my big thing for my platform is we have a community, not just the university community. we are in Tucson, and we should tap into that. We have so many organizations that are willing to help us. We obviously know we're in a little bit of a financial crisis. It's taking a toll on certain people, and we don't know what the future has. So we need to make those partnerships for the long term. So.
Great. If you want to know more about the financial crisis, you can come to our discussion about corporatization of the university on March 25th. Does anybody have a question for Joshua? Yeah, great.
So as you said, the AVP oversees services and everything. What are your thoughts about like the future of preserving cultural centers on campus, and how can we or how would you in your role continue to support cultural centers despite everything that's going on federally and in our state?
Great. Let me just repeat the question. The question, just for the cameras, is how do we make sure that we are preserving cultural centers, especially in the wake of everything that's going on federally, and especially with public universities like our own?
No, I love that. And obviously I wore a little statement today because of that. I think the most important thing is protecting the principles that these cultural centers and organizations have. Obviously, no matter what happens, there are certain things we cannot do based off, okay, the president told us to do something. We can't overtly do anything illegal, but the difference is words or actions. They're attacking words that mean certain things to our people, and it does hurt. But our community as a whole needs to recognize that culture is what builds community. Differences is what builds a community. If we all like the same things, we would hate each other. Let's be honest. If we all had the same background, it'd be boring. It's so good to know that we have such a wide range of different cultural centers, places where people can feel at home, away from home. And that's something that's so dear to me. And the one thing I will say is that as these attacks continue to happen, or I like to call them attacks because that's what they are, we need to band together. And I'm already trying to work on that, meeting with a lot of different cultural centers to have more events. A lot of people are not aware what cultural centers do and what they provide, the resources that are more specific to a specific background of people. And I think that's what the big thing is, education. We need to let people know what they are and how they benefit our community as a whole, not just those people in general. So I think us banding together, this is not just what will you do? It's what will we do? And that's the big thing. It's a huge problem that we will need to address more specifically as the time comes.
Great. Thank you so much, Joshua. All right, we have one more candidate, and then when we're done, did you want to come up and let us know a little bit more about the rest of the ASUA, the election dates and things that we need to know? Okay, great. Okay, we have one more candidate, and coming up finally is our second candidate, our final candidate for UA Administrative Vice President, which is Katie Kelleher. Hi, Katie. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how it is that you got interested in student government in general and in this position specifically.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Thanks for being here, everybody, and dedicating your time to learn more about leadership here on campus. I'm Katie Kelleher. I'm from Sierra Vista, Arizona, which is about an hour and a half southeast of Tucson. So I grew up pretty close to campus. I have one older sister who's been instrumental in my life, and I got to watch her go through student government in high school and then in college. And it started off kind of as a competition. I grew up in sports and really competitive, and so I watched her get into leadership in high school, and I was like, I'm going to do that because she did it. I'm going to do it better. And that only carried me so far until the end of high school when I swore it off. I was like, I'm tired of this. I just want to have fun now. I'm tired of competing. Until I watched her in college. She went to Baylor and she served as student body president there, and I got to see firsthand the impact she had on others and the impact she had on herself and me, and it really installed a passion for service above self, and that's carried me so far in my college career. I grew up going to Rotary, which is a community service club that my dad made me go to at 6 a.m. with him every Wednesday as a child. And at the time, I thought it was ridiculous and I didn't understand why he made me go with him. But I have core beliefs installed in me that we all are better together and that we owe it to each other to serve one another. And so now I'm here in front of you guys running for this position as a service to my peers and just as an open hand of being willing and able to do what I can for this community and university.
Excellent. So I'll ask again about sort of the campaign trail, right? And when you've met students, especially since it sounds like your investment is in sort of public service and making sure that we're sort of representing those students as best we possibly can. What is it that you often hear that students are concerned about, and how is it that you feel you can best sort of represent them and give them the public service?
Sure. My closest community is Greek life. I live in a sorority house, and I'm surrounded by joyful, happy students that have found their community already and have their friends and found their place on campus. But there is a large majority on this huge university who haven't found their place yet. And I am really passionate about that everyone should have a home here on campus and everyone should have their people that make it feel safe and welcoming and warm, because it is huge and people don't know what's available to them. UVA is a great campus as far as resources, and there's so much available to them, but I don't think that everyone is aware of it. And in my position, I just really, really hope to be an advocate for students, and also in another way, an advocate for administration in reaching students. I think student government talks a lot about being a voice for students, but it's, in my opinion, very hard for administration to get their voice out there to where students are heard. And I hope to be that liaison between students and administration.
So I'm interested in, as you said, you have close ties to the Greek life community, and one thing that I know on the podcast we talked about is that there are a lot of similarities in the infrastructure of how it is that sort of Greek life, sort of the systems of governing in Greek life are to the student body. So can you talk a little bit about how it is that your experience within that community might parlay itself into sort of helping to serve the student government as a whole?
Sure. I have firsthand gotten to witness some incredible leadership, and not just in my sorority, but just being surrounded by them everywhere, whether that's in student government or in Greek life. But I think that we're constantly learning from others, and being so tied into Greek life and watching their leadership they have an executive board of like 7-8 people, so it's a big leadership, and that's a lot of voices that you can listen to and hear and learn from. And I hope to apply all those different perspectives. I am just one person and only have lived my perspective and experiences, but through listening and learning, you get to gain other people's perspectives, and so I hope to do that through watching other leaders.
Great. And my last question for you would be, do you have any idea of sort of like what, ideally by the time that you graduate, what's a change that you would love to see on campus from the moment that you came in as a freshman and the moment that you leave as a senior? Right.
There are a couple things that come to mind, but the biggest one at the moment I think would be an increase in transparency, whether that is just information being heard more or information being easily accessible. I think the mass majority of students kind of go their day-to-day without really knowing what's going on in their university, and a huge thing for me running in student government last year was wanting to be involved in the campus at a deeper level, and I hope that whether students are involved in Greek life or just going to class, I want them to be involved at a deeper level through knowing what is going on.
Yeah. Again, awareness of the fact that these services exist and that we have a government that can support us is probably the first and most important step. Okay, let's get our last audience question. Who has a question for Katie? Yeah, great.
You talked about student involvement and the importance of people finding a community here on campus, as well as some of the resources that the university has. Are there any specific ways that you would promote awareness of those resources and those communities for people to find?
Is there any way specifically to promote awareness of the kind of resources that you're talking about?
Sure. I think a huge tool that we don't always use to its full potential is social media. But beyond that, I think that everyone has a network, and I want to promote through different branches of network versus just having, say, like a student government Instagram page where we promote it. You could reach out to other student leaders in Greek life or in the clubs to promote it themselves and reach a more diverse, broader group of people rather than just using one platform.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you. Before we leave, can we get just a little bit of information about the remaining election events that are going to be happening on the campaign for ASUA? And then I'll do one last plug for our upcoming events. But yeah, go for it. Oh, here you go.
Microphone. Hi everyone, my name is Ray Lade. I am the elections commissioner this year. So you'll be seeing my face a lot or receiving many emails from me this semester. Our next events will be. Sorry guys, I'm sick, so I'm trying to breathe. Our next events will be the debates, which is after spring break, the 16th, 17th, and 18th. We'll have our senator debates first, and then our AVP and EVP debates, and then our president debates. And after that, we'll have our general elections, and you will all receive an email about that to vote for any of these lovely candidates. And if you want to get to know our senators who are not here today, definitely check our website out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ray, you're a champ for coming sick. Thank you so much. All right, I'll just say one last time. I am Ted McLoof. I'm the executive director of the UA Discourse Series. We do have upcoming events. You can always follow our social media. We have TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. I won't call it X. Our YouTube, again, is where we're going to see our weekly Discourse Debrief podcast and our monthly No Need to Argue podcast. You can go ahead and check those out on Spotify as well because we're that cool. And I don't know if I've mentioned this, but we have an upcoming event on March 25th about the corporatization of the university. If you want to find out why you're paying so much for the things that you're paying for, including tuition, and why it is that the structure of our school is the way it is, you can certainly come to that, and it'll be super fun, and you can ask questions. I want to say a huge thank you to our candidates. A giant thank you to ASUA for collaborating with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Dane, our technician, who is always just such a great help with all of this. And absolutely, 100%, most importantly, saving the best for last, the hardest working group of interns in the history of the absolute universe. We have our UA Discourse Series interns. Thank you so much. If anybody wants to ask the candidates any more questions, they offered very generously to mingle with you, so you can go on up and talk to them. But otherwise, guys, thank you very much for coming, and we will see you next time.